kicks the can down the road a little bit further.
But Mike, let me ask you this. With what you're proposing, how does that create a free market?
Well, what do you mean by a free market?
Well, a free market, wouldn't be with the ECB setting interest rates and taking more control, and all of these people having more government, all of these countries getting more intervention from the governments, right?
All right. Well, I hate to break this to you, Lauren, because I like you very much, but any economy which is a currency issuing independent economy which operates with a central bank has interest rate setting ability. Indeed, it's the monopoly setter of interest rates. I mean, that's how it happens here in the United States. That's how it happens in Japan. That's how it happens in the UK. So, I mean, that is the essence of a free economy, that the government is the price setter of the money because it is also the issuer of the sovereign money. So there's no getting around that. I mean, that is, how it functions. That's how it will continue to function. I think what you're alluding to is to have an economy that's operating at near or close to full output and employment. I don't think we're going to get there anytime soon in Europe with the austerity, but something that allows, individuals to earn enough income, companies to earn enough profits to be current on their liabilities so that they're solvent and that the system continues on, sort of self-sustained. I think that's what you're talking about. And that's all about growth, right? I mean, you have to have policies that foster growth. You can't have policies that continue to drive this contraction because in the end, look what's happening. It's migrating all the way up the solvency ladder. It went from the most indebted countries, then it goes up to the next indebted ones. Finally, it'll ultimately get to Germany, and it gets to the very top of the ladder where everybody's broke and nobody has money. That's where it's headed.
Mike, let me get in here. I hear what you're saying, but at the same time, we didn't always have central banks, and some would argue that this distorts price discovery. But let's move on because I want to get to this point. We don't have fiscal unity in Europe yet, and each of these economies, each of these countries have their own political systems, and they're going to have to figure out a lot of internal domestic issues in order for that to happen. So let's look at what's going on, and we just have new news today that Spain's unemployment rate, they're expecting it to be 24%, and we see kind of this whole vicious cycle that happens with austerity, and then governments have to impose more austerity, and that hurts growth, and then unemployment. But at the same time, you need a sustainable economy out of that. You need to create some kind of sustainable situation and not just have the government intervening with what becomes more and more like socialist solutions.
Well, look, you made a point earlier about we didn't have central banks at certain periods in the past. And essentially, under those sorts of monetary systems, the quantity of money was fixed. And that's basically where we're going under the current system, where none of these countries anymore issue their own currency. So the quantity of money is fixed. Their liabilities far exceed the amount of money available to them right now, and you're seeing the economy shrink to some new equilibrium level way below where they were before. The problem is it's very, very disruptive socially. You see this happening with the protests and the riots in the street. You mentioned Spain, where I think youth unemployment is something like 50%. This is what you're going to see until you reach that new equilibrium level. And, it's very disruptive to societies. It's very disruptive to economies. We're not there yet. It's got to go further. And, just the process of moving that along, watching it from the outside, objectively, it looks like, it's a train wreck, basically.
Mike, real quickly, we don't have a lot of time, but I do want to get to this Brazil news, because with advocating for intervention by central banks and for money supply to be expanded, you do have these competitive devaluations, and you see Brazil coming out and saying, hey, in response to developed nations' accommodative monetary policy, we can't just sit by, we have to do something too. So doesn't this create a feedback loop that just continues?
Yeah, and it's a negative feedback loop because these competitive devaluations lead to a decline in the standard of living broadly, because everybody's doing it. What policymakers don't seem to understand is that exports are a cost and imports are a benefit. When you export your real product, your output, to foreigners in exchange for some currency. You know, and especially in today's world where most nations are pretty comparable in terms of their competitiveness, the only way you can do that is by suppressing wages and reducing the purchasing power of your currency, which by definition lowers your standard of living. So they're caught up in this race to the bottom, and basically what Brazil's president should say is, hey, this is great. Let's take the finished product from the United States. We get wealthier. We don't have to engage in this competitive devaluation. But they don't see it like that, and that's what's driving the whole process.
Well, and Mike, then we have to get back to the whole issue of central banks and their policies and expanding the money supply in the first place. That's for another day, though. For now, I'm going to have to leave it there. Thanks so much, Mike. That was